Today we're joined by Tony Pownall, and Tony Pownall has quite an extensive career in leadership, previously leading the international arm of a very large recruitment and search firm. And at the moment what he's doing is he's consulting to businesses and helping them to develop their teams around growth, sales and leadership capacity. So Tony, thanks very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
We'll be covering off a few key topics today with Tony. So around prerequisite experience, if you're moving into a leadership role, having some courage and being able to back yourself. And really importantly, because this is often the way into an organisation, is the first page of your CV. So Tony's going to be talking to us about that. Some of the key competencies that he as a leader is looking for or within people to bring into his organisation, and the credibility and proof, and also then what the next steps are for that. So Tony, just to kick it off, what do you think the prerequisite experience would be for somebody wanting to move into leadership?
Yeah, look, I'll start with prefixing all of my comments here, Craig, by saying it's very subjective, right, in terms of somebody's role moving into a leadership position. There's a lot of different ways to do it. I'm going to give you some feedback based on my own career, my own observations as a leader, but also 15 years in the recruitment sector as well, interviewing a lot of candidates and obviously hiring a number of leadership positions. So at the end of the day, it's still subjective. It's still my view of the world. Look, I think the first thing, prerequisite experience, it's really important to show mastery of your current role. So if you're in a specialist position now and you're looking to move into leadership, it seems obvious, but I've seen a number of people sort of, hey, give me the responsibility and I'll step up once you've given it to me. And I actually think it needs to be, show me that you've really mastered your own role first before I give you more responsibility, i.e. People to oversee. And that's really important, I think, because you don't need to be the highest performer. In fact, there's no real correlation that I've ever seen between highest performance as a specialist and moving into a leadership role and excelling. But you do need to at least be competent in your role to master that role. Why? Because you're going to be helping other people get to that same point. So if you haven't got there yourself, it's really difficult to have the confidence to push people to know that journey yourself, because you walked that road previously, and also from a credibility point of view, if you're going to be overseeing people who do those same specialist roles, but you haven't actually mastered that role yourself, it's difficult. So get your day job buttoned down, prove that you can do your day job first. And then I think it's, and this is what I personally did, and then it's look to your leader and think to yourself, how can I make my current leader look better in their role? What is my current leader judged by? And now that I've mastered my role and I know what I'm doing, and I'm working at a level of flow, or I'm sort of in the zone in terms of getting my work done and not thinking too hard about it. How can I step up to take on more responsibility and look to take that pseudo leadership role before I put my hand up and ask for a promotion? And that could be becoming a trusted 2IC in your current team. It's showing that I think you've got the confidence and the maturity for your leader to share more with you than perhaps they would with other team members, to show that you're going to champion change or projects. I think there's an important role in any team, and it's certainly, from my experience, it makes it easier as a leader if you've got an ally in that team that you can lean on to help lead by example through change, by letting them in a little earlier and telling them your plans and having them champion it. It could be supervising or mentoring younger staff. It could be becoming a subject matter expert in a particular area, looking for areas to train other people, projects, some sort of contribution in team meetings perhaps. There's lots of different things you can do to show that you're keen, willing and able to step up.
Yeah, I think you mentioned a couple of things there. One of them was making your leader, your current leader, look good. So it's demonstrating that. But I think also some of the other things you talked about was really loosely around the competencies, having that experience, that if you like, that introduction to that, and the key competencies or the leadership domains. And often we find when we're interviewing or in fact coaching people to move into a more senior leadership or even into their first leadership role, they're coming too much from the doing position.
Yep, that's right. So it's yes, you do your day job of what's required from you there, but it's thinking about the whole team and what the whole team's trying to achieve, and be more team orientated. And if you're going to be a role model, and if you're going to be that person helping your manager push change, then it's also thinking about, as a senior specialist, how you land on others, what impact you have on people around you. Because look, we can lead from any role, right? To be leaderful is a competency. It doesn't mean you need the title of leader. You know, we could all be out there today being leaderful by setting the right example, by helping others, by being more team orientated, and that'll take you a long way to your first leadership role.
Yeah. And I guess the other thing is around the courage and backing yourself. So to actually go out there and get it, and not necessarily wait for it to just fall in your lap.
Mm-hmm. Yep, you do have to back yourself, and some people don't back themselves enough. You know, they wait to be asked to be stepped up to take a leadership role, or wait to a restructure means they're sort of last person standing as the senior member of the team to take on the position. Look, leadership can seem a little scary, or could be seen to be something that, you know, some people unfortunately shy away from for whatever reason. I think it'd be a hugely rewarding role, incredibly rewarding, if you stop to smell the roses and look back from time to time to see what you've achieved. Unfortunately, success creeps up on you as a leader, but failure sort of hits you in the face. So you've got to take the time to be aware of what you've achieved with your team. But yes, look, you've got to back yourself, and part of backing yourself and having the courage is actually being vulnerable as a leader. I think to be vulnerable, you got to know yourself really well, Craig, and you got to be comfortable with who you are first. I think the best leaders I've worked for and with are really comfortable in their own skin. They don't have as many hang-ups, or, you know, they're not trying to fuel their own ego in a leadership position or try and prop themselves up. And I think it can only end badly if there's a leader who lacks the self-confidence to really step out of people's way and allow others to shine.
Yeah, I think that vulnerability piece is actually becoming, you know, very, very important now too, isn't it? And actually having the people awareness, self-awareness, you know, of the way, particularly today, where we're seeing all of these things being thrown at us. And I mean, COVID is one, but we've had many, many other things, you know, before in other years. But it's like how we react and respond in a situation, being self-aware. And particularly around how we're impacting other people when we react in that way. But you've still got to back yourself to be, as you say, Tony. I think it's really important. Something I found really important for me it wasn't until, you know, I backed myself, you know, that, you know, I actually came out of my shell, if you like, you know, and was comfortable in my own skin. And actually being who you are, because that's the authentic leadership that we need.
Oh, look, I made the mistake in my first leadership role where I thought I needed to have all the answers. I needed to know everything in advance of what could go wrong. So when the team invariably came to me with a question, I could answer it for them. I was pretty naive, really. Now I realise I've just got to back myself to find the answer with them, and back myself that, you know, we'll get through it. But to show that vulnerability of saying, actually, I don't know the answer to this, and geez, that's a bloody good question. And hey, we're facing a challenge that I haven't faced before either, and that's okay because we'll get through it. So I think that's for me, backing yourself.
So when somebody's looking for a new role and they've approached you as a search consultant, recruitment consultant, and so on, and members of your team, and then I guess you, as importantly, you know, as a senior leadership person, executive in the organisation, what are you actually looking for on their CV, you know, and on their first page?
Well, I think, I don't know whether it's just the habit of how people write their CV, or whether it's the fact that it's harder to sometimes measure achievement in a leadership role. But I see a lot of people's CVs, especially early on in someone's leadership career, when they haven't really nailed who they are as a leader. They're still writing as if they're a senior specialist. And by that I mean they talk about their achievements as being more I-focused than we-focused. As I say, it's a little easier sometimes to appreciate and to identify and articulate what your own achievements are. It is harder sometimes to get across in a really punchy way what your team's achievements are. It's really difficult, Craig, to step outside of an organisation and take your first leadership role in a different company. Certainly, it's one of the fastest ways to get a pay rise, but it's not always the fastest way to get your first leadership role. A lot of my advice to people is, look, unless you have to leave or you've unfortunately lost your job for whatever reason, do your best to stick around where you are and get your first leadership role there, and then move across to a bigger leadership role with greater responsibility. Even if it's just supervising staff at a 2IC level or informal oversight of staff, that's still better than nothing, I think, before you make your move. Get all that into your CV, even if it's just supervising people informally, that's fine. People need to see that right up front in your CV, that you've got some level of oversight, that you've mentored people, you've been involved in training, you've been involved in projects, something to show that you've had a greater level of responsibility in your role than just being that specialist. And then if you are currently in a leadership role and you're looking to move on to another position, then think about achievements of the team. Think about team budgets, think about who might have won awards in your team, think about who might have been promoted from your team, even if it means leaving your team for another role. Those sorts of things, I think, show that you've helped up other people.
So would you say that on the first page of your CV, that showing your career progression and showing a track record is really important on your first page, or are you not so much interested in that? What would you say is as far as the content is concerned?
Look, if you are coming from a situation of having some progression in your last role, or in your last company, I should say, and you've moved through, levels of specialisation into a leadership position, then I think that's good, because it shows some trajectory, it shows some momentum into a leadership role already, that someone's backed you, and that you've done well in the eyes of somebody else, and they've promoted you. So yeah, look, if you've got that, then absolutely put it up front.
So Tony, what would you actually not want to see on the front page of a CV? We talked about what you want to see, but what would actually put you off?
What would put me off? Well, if somebody was applying either to work for me or to take a new position with one of my clients through me, and they hadn't been really clear about their goal of moving into leadership or moving up within leadership on their first page, they hadn't been really obvious with, that's where they're heading. And they hadn't made it obvious to me that the things that they deemed as important as success were what was happening around them rather than just what was happening to them. I worry when I see too much I in CVs for leaders, because it just says that leaders more focused on how they look in the eyes of others rather than their team. So, a little more we focused, a little less I focused in how you actually position some of those achievements, and really clear about your intent, I think, about where you're going and your passion for people and leading. I want to see that come through. I want to see people excited about leading others.
So I think it's, I know, when I'm working with people, I think it's very important to understand what their contribution was. I know there's one thing that, I don't like is when somebody said, I contributed to such and such. It's like, well, what did you contribute? So I'm wanting to see what the I did, but I'm also wanting to see what the I enabled in the team. So enabled the team, to be able to, do that. So it's about enablement. It's about, being the person who's the facilitator of growth. And I know that's what you're focused on, or have been focused on, is actually lifting team or leadership capability. And, as a leader, actually that's really important, because you don't want to have to be there 24/7 making things. So actually, why wouldn't you want to lift the capability of the team? But yeah, I take your point. So the other point that you made was around their career progression or their direction not necessarily being clear, or them not being clear about that either. Yeah, so if you didn't see that, then that would be...
Yeah, exactly. And I say that, Craig, because I think there's a lot of reluctant leaders out there. I think there's a lot of people that step into a leadership role. They've enjoyed being a senior specialist in whatever space, and they've stepped into leadership role because they felt it was kind of about time, or someone suggested they do that next, or sort of push them into it because there was no one else there to take the role after a restructure, perhaps. and I just see too many people, kind of manage others because that's what their job is. I'm really interested in people that are genuinely passionate about seeing the best in others and seeing what a team can achieve by coming together and being collaborative and being driven for a singular result. I think that's the sort of thing that I buy into as both a leader and a recruiter is seeing somebody's intent and passion for leading others rather than kind of, well, I've fallen into this job of having to oversee other people. And
yeah, I think we've all seen the ego-driven leader as well, haven't we? So it's rather than a giving, the selfless leader. We've seen plenty of the leaders around where it's all about them and they push their people out of the way to get into the front sort of thing, rather than them promoting their people forward and up and acknowledging, the great things that their team does. It comes all the way back to what your point before was around the I. So I think there's a nice segue into the competencies that you're looking for, in a leader as well. So what would be, say, like the 3 competencies that you would be looking for somebody either on their CV or at an interview, being able to demonstrate?
Yep. In terms of competencies or behaviours of within leadership, and I think in particular, I'm thinking about leaders within maybe their first 4 or 5 years of leading a team. So it could be 1 or 2 people, it could be 4, 5, 6, 7 people. But the early on, I suppose, in your leadership career, what are the sort of behaviours or competencies that you want to stand out? Well, I think it starts with trying to understand what sort of leader you are. I'll give you an example. Something I really pride myself on is really looking at that angle of coaching and culture. So I think a lot around culture development and how you develop a high-performing culture. But also coaching and how do you get the best out of other people, and what experience can I demonstrate to show that maybe I've lifted the capability of people within my team. So that's kind of my angles, if you like, that I think I'm probably strongest in, because as leaders we're not perfect across all parts of leadership. So what is your angle? What's your personal leadership brand? And really push and promote that. Coaching and culture is sort of my angle, but it could be around customer championing. So, what have you done to really improve the outcomes for customers through your team? It could be around process improvement. It could be around building efficiencies, etc. So there's lots of different angles that you can take, in particular in that first sort of 4 or 5 years. And once you're comfortable with sort of who you are as a leader in that brand, then it's looking at things like, as I say, what experience have you got or achievements have you got around process improvement, customer centricity, adoption of change. Crikey, COVID aside, we're all managing change and things are fluid at the best of times. So what have you done to help a team through change and, work with different systems, different outcomes, different objectives and priorities? What have you done to set standards and values within the team? All of those sorts of things I think stand out as behaviours. So adoption of change, setting direction, customer centricity, process improvement, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I was just talking to somebody today about that change and how today. So it has been for a number of years, and it's always been, I guess. But I think today it's how you actually take your people through what we thought was transformational change a few years ago really wasn't compared to what we're dealing with now. And it's how you get the best out of your people and nurture them and coach them, to use your words, to develop them. I think that's going to become such an important competency moving forward. You don't want somebody who's going to explode, for example, go off the deep end or whatever, leave their team confused. It's already confusing enough out there as it is. So if you've got that whiplash leader, it's like, or the leader that says, well, you're doing it, rather than the we're doing it, then, it's not really going to be that helpful.
Yeah, I think a couple of things with change, Craig, that come to mind with leadership is you've got to help people demystify the change and what it might mean for them, because there's a lot of fear naturally around things changing in terms of roles and expectations. So let them know that it's okay, and we won't get it perfect, but we've got to adapt, and that you've got their back. I think that's important. So taking some of the anxiety of fear away. And sort of related to that is helping them understand the why. I think with change, we focus too much on the what, by when, and how, but not the why. why are we doing this? But more importantly, trying to translate that why into people in your team and what that means for them, how that resonates with them. I think the best leaders really get that why working for their team because they can see the why through that lens.
Yeah, it's so important now. And I think, whether it's a generational thing or whatever, but, the days have gone where you just go up to somebody and say, just do it. People actually, if you're expecting your team to be part of the equation of getting things done, they want to be part of it, and they actually want to know why they're contributing, so potentially they could contribute.
Yep.
And to your point, earlier, Tony, it was right, not having all of the answers. So maybe by communicating with your team why you're doing something, they'll actually say, well, maybe we could approach it this way, or whatever, so rather than saying, get this done, this is what you're going to do, whatever, give them the license.
Yep, as a leader, as long as you're clear on the values and expectations you have, how do you expect the team to behave as a team? And what does good output look like in your mind? What does high performance look like? As well as where do we need, what's the end game? From a whole of team output point of view, where do you want that team to get to? Now, if you're clear on those things, how you get there, you may not know all the answers. And that's where you can put that to your team and say, look, guys, this is where we need to get to. This is what good behaviors and how I want us to act as a team so we get there in a way that's really healthy and sustainable. But, we've got some unanswered questions here around, we've got some decisions to make about some of the things we need to do as a team to achieve that outcome.
Just the next area that I know we're going to cover off is credibility and proof, and a lot of what we've talked about just so far is actually demonstrating those areas right all the way through to here is a lot of the credibility and proof. But often I know when I'm asking somebody, we do interview skills training at my career brand, and they give me or Kyla, our interview skills coach, an answer. And it's almost like they've gone on the internet and got, the internet definition of, what that competency is. That's not necessarily providing the credibility or the proof. It's how they're going to actually apply that. So I guess, how do you measure that in a person when you're interviewing somebody as a leader, taking them into your organisation? How are you expecting them to demonstrate that credibility and proof?
Yeah, well, good question. It's a little harder as a leader. It's harder as a leader because I want you to have a specific example that brings that competency to life, right? Especially around, let's take that topic of change and helping a team move from one state to another, or the adoption of new technology or strategy or whatever else you're trying to achieve. It feels a little less tangible at first glance when you're trying to think about how do you sell yourself. So you got to work a little bit harder to tell a story around and using the STAR model or CAR model or whatever you're using as a structure to talk through the specific example that brings that competency to life. Let me tell you about a time when I had this situation within the team and what I did to work through it. So you do have to have those examples ready to go, and sort of 4 or 5 good team examples that help demonstrate how you've coached and developed people, how you've helped a team change direction and build adoption towards something new, perhaps how you've changed a process for the better customer centricity, whatever it might be. So have that story ready to go and be really, really specific around what you did to impact the result for the team. How you set the platform for the team to shine or thrive in that situation. It's harder, but you need to be prepared.
Well, so you raised 2 points there. One was bringing it to life, so the story piece of it. And the other point that you mentioned, I guess this is why you've been so successful as a leader, Tony, is you're always mentioning the team and, how you just said there, how you make the team shine. And it wasn't about how I'm going to make myself shine. And I know you and I have both worked under leaders where, it's been about them and how they shine. And gosh, doesn't that make it harder for the team to shine anyway? But you talked about the story, and I know when I was working through some interview skills coaching with a tech leader, when she, and this is a global HR person, massive experience in some really interesting countries, Turkey, Istanbul, all those areas and everything. So culturally, really challenging, bringing people on board. And it wasn't until she actually started telling the story that she brought it to life. And it was engaging. Rather than the first time she was talking, it was like she was just reading it off the book. So I think what you were saying before about bringing it to life, and let me tell you about a time when, such and such happened. And I think being able to weave it back in so it actually is relatable as well. So the interviewer can see you in their business, not talking about something that's totally left field.
Absolutely. I think if you're answering a competency-based interview question in front of me in an interview, I'm going to be really impressed if you can put some good structure, some good specifics to that story, and therefore I'm going to rate you as a good communicator in any role. But I think the level of expectation goes up if you're a leader in front of me, because to your point, your ability to tell that story, to take people through a situation, gives me an insight to how you might take a team through a situation and how you might build fellowship through storytelling. So therefore the ability of that leader to tell a story, to build connection, to have people appreciate the why by the way in which you communicate in that interview. I'll get a lot out of that as a recruiter or as a hiring manager.
You mentioned CAR and STAR. I know something we tack on to the back of that and say, well, look, let's get a little bit more advanced now. We call it CART and START, and we've added a T on the end of it for takeaway. That's actually the goal that you're leaving on the table, because when I'm hiring a leader, I want them to bring some value. If they bring learnings, which means, and they can demonstrate that they've learned as well, I know that I'm going to be that much further ahead. So they're not going to learn, not going to learn on my coin. Well, obviously they're going to carry on learning, but it's that they're able to. So what was the takeaway? And to your point earlier, Tony, about vulnerability, say what the learnings were. We really stuffed up there. I reckon if we did it this way, I could have taken 15 weeks off the actual development time or the go-to-market time. If I'd done that, we would have been approximately $750,000 ahead in our bottom line by the end of the year. So I know that person coming into my business has learnt that, and I've demonstrated, A, that they're a learner, that they're continuously learning, but also they're going to bring that IP into my organisation as opposed to somebody who I'm not quite sure about. That's the vulnerability piece as well that you were talking about earlier. Be prepared, to talk about your mistakes and so on. So the credibility and proof that you've done something and you've tried your hardest is also that sometimes you fail.
Yes, you still have to change some things on the fly. You have to change directions perhaps. So what did you learn through that? I like the T. That's good. I'm gonna steal that myself.
Go for it. That's your takeaway from today.
There you go.
Just to wrap things up, we want to talk a little bit about the people, how you go about search channels and so on, how you get in front of search and what would be the next step. So what would be the key resource?
Well, I think the first and most important resource, if you like, in your professional life, who rate you, who you are comfortable with, and you've got a good connection with. So that could be a previous manager, it could be a current manager if you've got a really good open sort of dialogue with your manager about your career and what you're looking to do. It could be another senior stakeholder you've spent a lot of time with, but someone who is going to give you some good feedback around your career to date and then your opportunities for the future. Someone who's a really good sounding board for you is in particular, I think, around moving into or progressing through leadership roles. I think that's critical, actually. I think that's the best resource, because I talked earlier about knowing yourself and being comfortable with yourself. Well, that comes by seeking feedback, I think, from people around you that know you well, who are prepared to give you that feedback and give it to you on the chin. So I think that's the first thing I'd seek out when you're thinking about building your career is have those, surround yourself with 2 or 3 of those people if you can, even if it's just one person that you've really got that relationship with, and then think about extending your networks beyond that. So who have you met over the years that you can pick up the phone to, which I think is still a very powerful medium, pick up the phone to or drop an email to perhaps and ask for some help. human nature is such that if you say, hey, look, I'd really like to ask you a favour, not many people say no. In fact, I don't think anyone says no if someone comes out of your past and says, look, could I ask a favour of you? And that favour is, hey, look, this is what I'm looking to do next. Have you got any direction for me where I might go? And if there's anyone else you think I might speak to. So I think use that connection to further extend your connection. Something that I've done previously with my own career is actually go into any networking situation, any conversation with the goal of trying to get 2 other names of people in their network that you should speak to.
Going into it thinking that you might be able to help them. It's not all, how can I help you now? Is there anything I can do, for you, rather than just being one-way traffic?
Yeah, I agree with that. Absolutely. Some of the other channels to look at when thinking about your search and how you're going to get your next role, because I think more and more people's next role comes from someone they know, in particular in this country, right? So have a think about who you know, who you should know through those people, but also where else should your CV be sitting? Should it be on career sites of organisations that you admire? So that they can find that when they need. Is your LinkedIn profile obviously up to scratch? And that is an online live CV clearly. So make that really obvious of who you are and what you've achieved. And go beyond just listing your roles and do more about selling yourself on LinkedIn. And also get some feedback from others of who they rate within that recruitment sector. And my advice with dealing with recruiters, having been one myself, is pick 2 or 3 that have been recommended to you that you think are in the right sort of wheelhouse in terms of sort of clients they work with and sort of roles that they recruit, and build a relationship with them.
Hey, that building of relationships piece is really important, Tony. And I often, when I'm talking, if we've got people coming through my career brand, one of the coaching leads that we give them is your conversation with a recruiter doesn't start when you need a job. Your conversation, it's conversations with your recruiter and your search consultant and so on, and being part of their toolkit as well, not just one-way traffic. Again, it's like, well, if you pick up some information along the way, you're already in a current role, flick it off to Tony and say, hey, Tony, you might find your clients find this piece of information of use. Then all of a sudden, you're staying front of mind with that search consultant for a broad set of reasons, not just, there's that Craig guy again. Yep. Actually, it is 3 years. He's looking for a job. Or who is that guy? So I think there's many channels, aren't there? And it's a matter of, to your point, picking the right ones, picking the right search consultants, and so on.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, stick with them. I think the relationship over time can definitely be mutually beneficial, for sure. So yeah, it's not a one.
So what would be the next steps? Okay, so if you were starting again, as a junior leader, and you're wanting to move up the channel, what are the steps that you would be taking now to be, and maybe over the next period, to be able to make that transition into a leadership role?
Ooh, okay. I'd be asking lots of questions to begin with. I'd be asking lots of questions of people around me that know me professionally around what they think I need to do to round myself off in terms of experience. Where do they think I'm still missing in terms of my experience or track record based on where I'm looking to go next? What can I do to close that gap? What experience can I get on my CV by putting my hand up for projects or other responsibility to help with closing that gap? I think ask a lot of questions in that regard. What education perhaps do I need to undertake just to round myself off as well? But I think when it comes to leadership, there's a lot more value in exposure and experience than there is in education. Certainly as you move up the specialist ranks, how can I educate myself to be better as a specialist? But I think leadership is surround yourself with people that questions about their career, what they did, and what you need to do to get to where they are. I think that's the best path to take. And share your goals with people. Be very open about what you want to achieve with your career and leadership, so that they can buy into that goal and help you get there.
A really important point. Have a goal, or have goals. I mean, how can you actually expect your team to perform if you as a leader don't have goals in the first place? So actually, to share your goals with somebody, you've got to set them first. So,
right.
And be realistic. We often hear about the SMART goals, and maybe sharing them with people will help you develop some reality too, around them. So we'll talk about the lofty goals, but often sometimes we need a reality check, and it's only through talking to people like yourself, Tony, that you've done it before, you've been there. It's like, so the risks, where they've got the potential traps, but also where perhaps they could take a different path and get there sooner or safer. So their first leadership role is not a disaster. So what are the things that they need to look out for? Yeah.
Craig, I've certainly seen a lot of people quite disillusioned after their first leadership role because they weren't well supported, and there's a lot of lessons, as I found out, to learn in leadership, and they're a little disillusioned at the end of it. One thing I'd say is, once you master the art, if you like, and there's a lot of art in leadership, once you've mastered the art of successfully running a small team, you can actually scale up pretty quickly. And one of the biggest mistakes I think leaders make early on is they take on a lot of the worries and concerns of their team and load that on their own shoulders. And the danger with that is, as your team gets bigger, you're just taking on more responsibility and worries of a bigger team. So your ability to balance your own workload with helping coach and get the best out of your team, your ability to take on their problems but not let it weigh you down. Once you get through that as a leader and you're more comfortable with running a team and realizing that people are infallible and they've got things happening outside of work that are going to knock them off their stride, and you're just trying to get them to be the best versions of themselves in the office, and you can only control so much, and you can't keep yourself up at night worrying about every possible aspect of that team. And it's easy to do that even with 2 or 3 people. Once you get through that, come out the other side, well, you can scale up really quickly. It means you can be running a team 2 or 3 times the size without going, well, God, I can't afford to because I don't have a number of hours in the day. You've got better and more efficient with managing your time and energy and emotion as a leader to allow you to take on a bigger team.
Hey, Tony, that's all been really useful. And thank you so much for giving up your time today to be able to talk to us about how people can transition into a leadership role. And I'm sure that many will take away some of the nuggets of gold that you've been able to leave on the table today. So thank you very much.
No problem, Craig. I see the sun starting to shine on me, so I'm going to go out and enjoy it.
Good as gold. Hey, thanks very much, Tony.